Maria Nate. I'm here in my official capacity as the state GOP secretary, and I also serve on the executive board. I just want to testify against this bill. As has been stated before, we did start the caucus in 2012, and I was very, very involved in that. We had an excellent caucus in Madison County, and we had a bunch of people that came, and they were very energized, and they are still active today because of that caucus. We moved the primary with S-1066, which had the blessing of all the GOP establishment, including Senators Hill and Davis. And we still generated a lot of excitement in the primary, the presidential primary, because of that. We did have several candidates come and visit our state, including Trump, Jr., Cruz, Rubio, Fiorina, I can't say that. And it generated a lot of excitement. We had a lot of events. We had a lot of participation. We had a vibrant election season. And then in 2020, when there was no real presidential primary, we still had Trump Jr. come. So it does generate excitement in our party. Candidates come, and they hear Idaho's concerns. We've had just 2 election cycles to do this, and to go ahead and change this primary without the input of the state party and the executive committee and Dorothy Moon, I think is really wrong. We have not had a chance to bring this to the people. We will be having a meeting in the summer where this can be addressed, and I know for a fact that Chairman Moon has not had the time to discuss this with the bill sponsors, and I think we need to include her and the party in this process before we go ahead and unilaterally change the primary. You've talked about the turnout. We have 2 times for Republicans to come to vote. We have them in March, and then we have them in May. So I would argue that when you combine those 2, we actually have more Republican turnout. So it is not the Republican thing to do to change this primary and depress the excitement that can come from this. So I would just urge you to vote no on this. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Ms. Nate. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Nate. Did you testify on the House side
no.
in this matter?
Excuse me, Chairman Guthrie and Senator Lee. No, this bill came very, very quickly. There was very little time to get the momentum and the understanding, and I know that the chair tried desperately to get in touch with Representative Manwaring and was not able to do that. So it came very quickly. It went across the House floor very quickly, and it was Chairwoman's understanding that this would not come up until next week in hearing. She's actually in Arizona with her elderly mother, and that's why she's not here. So this just feels very, very fast for something that is a very, very big deal. And to, again, not have the party's involvement just feels very wrong to me.
Senator Winder.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Nate, thank you for being here and testifying. I see you around the building every day.
Yes.
And I see your husband around the building every day. So hopefully you seem to know what's going on in our body. You can respond within 10 seconds of when we do something, and yet you tell us you're not aware of what's going on in the other body. So I question that. But my real question to you is the Republican Party moving towards a restrictive participation in elections based upon the rules, based upon resolutions, based upon the direction of the executive officers to tighten up the primary to where you actually had to go to a central committee to get endorsed by the party, to actually have your name on the ballot? Is that where the party's headed?
Ms. Nate.
Chairman Guthrie and Senator Winder, I would argue that that is not the subject of this bill, but I'm happy to address that. Republicans should be electing Republicans. And so we worked hard to make that happen. And that's the way it goes. Now, as far as how quickly this moved, absolutely, I am aware of what goes on in this building very quickly. But this is a big state with a whole lot of Republicans, and we're spread out across a large mass. And so to get the entire executive committee moving on a dime is very, very difficult. And so there has been a lot of discussion about this amongst the executive committee, but it takes time. As you heard, Mr. Hurst barely heard about this on Monday. It takes time to get the word out. You guys can move very, very quickly here because you're all in here together all the time with each other. But everybody else is out here with lives and jobs and families. And so as soon as they started to really understand the ramifications of what was happening, they mobilized. And now you'll see that we don't agree on the executive committee with each other very much, but pretty much everyone is in agreement that what you're doing here is too fast and without the input of the party, which is all we're asking for, is let's let the party decide.
Follow-up, Senator Winder.
I disagree with your statement that my question didn't have something to do with this bill, and maybe I can clarify it for you. And that is, the party's asking us, as the state and every taxpayer, to pay for a primary. I think if the party wants to have a primary on January 1st and they want to pay for it, that's great. They have that. But my question, even Ms. Turnbow talked about the right of free association. And what I see our party doing is trying to eliminate the right of free association so that someone like myself, that people in this building have labeled as the devil's advocate, the devil incarnate, would not be considered a Republican. And yet I've worked on hundreds of races for 50 more years. I've been involved in the party in amazing ways trying to get Republican candidates elected. But whenever you get a few people that want to control the system and identify who's a Republican and who's not, I think there is a real legitimate question as to who pays for the primary that the party needs to recognize.
Ms. Knight.
Chair Guthrie, Senator Winder, again, I will say that this is about the presidential primary, which was voted upon by this body to move to May. And so to move into this discussion about how we are trying to push people out of the party with this presidential election, the whole point of doing this early is to increase Idaho's presence on the national landscape, to get us part of Super Tuesday, to get people excited, to get candidates here. That is not that is including people. That is making Idaho a bigger presence. That's not what you're saying. I think you're talking along a different topic, and I do take a little bit of umbrage in what you're saying and trying to lump this into the presidential primary, because I think these are two separate things. And again, this primary presidential date moved to March is great for Idaho. It's great for Idaho Republicans. And that is what we are, right? Most of the body here, we are Republicans. If you want to have the discussion about who pays for it, I think that's a great discussion that we should have. Absolutely, let's have that discussion. But the chairman and the party was never brought into that discussion. And I think that's a mistake. And I think you ought to hold this bill and let's bring the party into this and have the discussion about who should pay for it.
Chairman?
Senator Winder.
We've already had testimony that the Secretary of State did discuss with the chairman. So I think there's a misrepresentation being made. One, I would ask whether or not the person testifying would say whether or not you have evidence that the Secretary of State never spoke with the chairwoman, excuse me.
Chair Guthrie, Senator Winder, she did talk with Secretary of State early, but she has not. She has. Let me finish, please. She has not talked to either of the bill sponsors who created this bill. So the talks were early, and then this came quickly. So I think that to not have her involved in the drafting of the bill is a mistake.
Let's go with Senator Taves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Nate, for being here. I first of all want to say that I think it's wrong, and I hate to hear the the use of rhetoric, name calling in our own party. So I just want to say that I think it's inappropriate, and I feel sorry that Senator Winder has dealt with that. We shouldn't be calling people right wing or extremists or any of these things. It's totally inappropriate. As far as a question, I want to.
Mr. Chairman, I object. I did not say that. I was talking about what people had called me.
Yeah, that's
That's what he was indicating, Senator
yeah.
Winder.
That's what I meant. I meant that any name calling is wrong, and I'm sorry that happened to you. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, that's what he meant.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. Historically, has there been a coordination between the Secretary of State and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party where these things were discussed in and bylaws made prior to the decisions made in this body? That's what I'm wondering, is if the coordination is usual to be done in such a way that it would be before a winter meeting or before a summer meeting that the decisions would be made.
Ms. Knight.
Chair Guthrie, Senator Taves, I can tell you that in 2015, S-1066 did cross both chambers with zero problem. And so there must have been some sort of coordination at that point with the parties. And to have Senator Hill and Senator Davis completely on board with that leads me to believe that they did discuss the cost, that they did discuss the mechanics of all of this, and then it still passed. So the fact that that hasn't happened this time is problematic for me.
Follow up? Mr. Chair, Ms. Nate, so to further the discussion, because the previous question answer seemed unclear to me when it was asked if there was discussion prior to this bill. Was there discussion prior to the winter meeting when a decision could have been made, to your knowledge?
Ms. Knight.
Chair Guthrie, Senator Taves, absolutely not. The first time anybody heard about this bill was very early in February, a month after the January winter meeting. So if this was in play before then, there was a perfect opportunity to discuss this. And again, even when it was brought up, very little communication with the Secretary of State, zero communication with any of the bill sponsors. I think that's a problem.